Hello and welcome to Model Train Fun. Today we're going to look at the Märklin braking module or Märklin brake module. So why do I want to use the Märklin brake module? Well, in some of the previous videos we've looked at when you have signals, there's a stop track that actually stops the train automatically if the signal is red. However, the disadvantage of that is when you use the stop track, it cuts the power. When it cuts the power, you cannot have light and you cannot have sound on the locomotives. However, there is actually a way around that, and that is the Märklin brake module, because it actually works differently. What the brake module will do is it will ask the locomotive to brake. So it basically sends out a special signal on the track, and then the decoder can react to that. The Märklin brake module I have here is the 72442. There's also a 72441. So basically, if we have the brake module here, they are exactly the same with one little difference. If you look at the plugs that go into here, the 72442 has the new style of plugs that has a little thingy on the side when you put it in. The 72441 has the old style of the plugs. I'm gonna only show the 72442 here, so the new one with the new style of plugs, but you can do exactly the same with the other one. In this video, I'm gonna show how to connect the brake module to an M83, not directly to a signal. And why am I doing that? Because in this video we want to go through the principles behind the brake module, and we want to see it work. And actually that's the simplest way to make it work, by connecting it to an M83. It actually gets much more complicated when you want to connect it to a signal. So enjoy the video. Here we have the brake module, so the Märklin 72442. Note there's also an older one, the 72441. The only difference is basically the plugs you can plug into it, where the 442 here has the new style plugs and the 441 has the old style plugs. And no, those two are not compatible, those two styles of plugs. So let's look at what we have here in the box. We actually don't have that much in the box. We got a manual here. If we look at this manual here, there are different types of setups depending on how you want to use it. But do remember, in this one here with the modern signals, so those that start with the 7.6, that series of signals, both for the light and the semaphores, this manual doesn't cover it. You have to look in the manual for those. Then we have the brake module itself, and notice here on the brake module it's actually called a signal module, which makes sense because it is actually used for when you have signals, or that's its most dedicated purpose. If we look here we have the this is the 72442, so it has the new type of plugs. You can see there's something here on the side, and the 441 basically have the old style. So we have this one here, but we need a lot of other things as well. We need some plugs that can plug into this. Here I have a handful of red ones. Remember, they come in different colors. And here you can see this is the modern one. You can see it has something here to the side. So the newest type of plug here, I will put in the description below, and here on the screen a list of the model numbers for the different types of plugs, both the new and the older style. And then you need some spade connectors if you want to use it with the C-track, so you can connect it directly to the C-track. Don't forget you can also solder it. So this is the spade connectors are the 74995. And then you need, let me just zoom out here, you need a bunch of wires. So I have different kind of wires here, and if you want to use all the color coding, what I do is I use the blue wire 7101, I use the yellow wire 7103, I use the red wire, the 7105, and the brown wire here, the 7102. So these are the Märklin ones. Of course, you can use equivalent other ones you can find and buy. Oh, and another thing you need to remember is the insulators. So these are the Märklin 74030. These ones are insulators here. You can use, this is for the C-track. In each bag here there are 2 sets of insulators of 4, and each of the 4 set here will actually help you insulate 1 section. So you need 3 of these, because remember, we need 3 insulated sections. So you need 2 bags of this, so that's important to remember. So how does the braking module actually work? Well, it has 3 sections of track, a transition section, a braking section, and a stop section. Now the idea is, if you see here the train or the locomotive coming from the left, you have a red signal. What will happen? Well, the locomotive will enter the braking section and start braking and stopping nicely in front of the signal. If the signal then turns green, then the train will actually pass the signal and continue on. So these 3 sections here, the most important one is actually the braking section. The stop section is basically there for safety. It's an emergency stop. Think of it as an emergency stop. The idea is, if the train doesn't manage to brake within the braking section, then there will be a stop section. And by the way, this is a stop section in the traditional sense that we have talked about in previous videos. It's basically an unpowered section. So if the signal is red and the train passes, then there's no power, it cuts off and stops right there. Now what is important here for this to work is the locomotive decoder needs to support this. So it must support the Märklin brake module. There's actually multiple ways braking work. The Märklin brake module is one way. I know DCC does it in other ways. So it's important that the decoder does that. So all modern Märklin decoders support this. I know the ESU, Look Sound, and Look Pilot does it as well, and I believe others do as well. So what is it actually that happens? Well, what actually happens is, if the signal is green, then the braking section and the stop section has digital power or track power. And notice I call it digital/track power. Some call it AC, but it's not AC. It's actually digital power. It's a special modulation that contains a digital signal. If it then turns red, the signal, what happens? Well, the signal will then, in the braking section, not give the digital power anymore, but give a continuous DC power. So you see the power changes completely. And what the decoder does is it detects, oh, now it's not my usual digital or track power, now it's DC power, so now I'm going to initiate a braking sequence. And by the way, this braking sequence is exactly the same braking sequence as you normally would have if you just set the speed to 0. In addition to the braking section, what the brake module does is it makes sure in the stop section there's no power, such that if the train does not manage to stop within the braking section, then it will hit the stop section and then it will actually stop. Now, what is the cool thing here with the braking section that the braking module gives us compared to a traditional stop section? Well, a stop section has no power, so if the locomotive has sound or light and so on, it gets cut off. However, since there's still power in the track, in this case DC power, the decoder can still pick this up and drive it for the sound and the light. Now the idea then is, when the signal turns from red to green, Then it will get the normal digital power on the braking section and the stop section again. And basically what the decoder will do is it'll say, oh, I got my normal digital/track power back. I'm just going to continue with the previous speed. So it accelerates nicely and resumes the previous speed. Now the transition section is actually interesting here, because if you look out here where the train is on the drawing before where I have all my brake module, so before the transition section, that is digital/track power. And now we have DC power in here. If you just have these two tracks connected, what will actually happen is that they will short circuit your entire layout, and that's not what we need. Also notice another thing, each section here is controlled individually by the braking module, right? So the braking section might have digital power or track power, the stop section might have digital power or no power, and the transition section, I'm a little unsure what it has, it's actually not specified, but it will adapt depending on where the locomotive is. So these need to be isolated from each other. All right. So what do I need to consider then when I have a braking module? Well, first of all, the decoder must support it. It basically must be able to detect this DC power and then brake when it recognizes it. There's two things here you have to be aware of as well. In the decoder, you can typically disable recognizing this brake module or this way of doing braking as well. So you may have to go into the decoder and actually enable this. There's also the other thing is all, or I should say most decoders nowadays, even Märklin decoders, they actually recognize as many different types of power. They recognize AC, digital power, and they recognize DC. So in this case, the decoder could just say, oh, it looks like DC. I'm just going to continue on DC power and then continue. So if this happens, you have to go in and disable the DC to prevent that it continues and don't recognize the braking signal. For Märklin locomotives of a newer or more modern decoder, they already support this, so you don't need to do anything. So by default, they will actually work with the brake module and not turn into DC. The other thing that's important to know here is when it hits the braking section and starts braking, the locomotive will do the normal brake as it's configured to do. In the Märklin world, you can increase or have a longer braking distance by increasing the braking delay, or you can make a shorter braking distance by decreasing the braking delay. And braking delay you can configure. I'm using the term from the Central Station 3. In the Mobile Station 2, it's actually called DEC or deceleration. In some other decoders or brands, it may be called other things, so you may have to look this up. So the thing sometimes you will hear people complain about is, okay, it stopped, but it didn't do the braking sound or squealing of brakes when it braked. Do remember, as normally when you would drive your locomotive and you suddenly set the speed to 0, it needs to have there is a speed threshold. It needs to be above a certain speed before you start braking for the braking sound to actually engage. And this is typically also something you can configure in the decoder. And then the last thing, some decoders actually have a delay. So you will see they will kind of like roll a little and then brake before they brake. So if that's the case, you have to take that into account when you're figuring out the length of the braking section. So basically what all this sums up to is you really need to consider how long is your braking section. You need to make sure that all your trains stop within the braking section and never hit the stop section. You also want, if you have a signal there, place it at the correct place. Then you could also try to coordinate where the locomotives stop, so you can change the braking delay so they stop at the same spot in front of the signal as well. And in theory, if you have made all of this well and you have tested every single train you have on your layout and so on, then you could even considering that the stop section may not be needed anymore. So it could be that this signal is just before a turnout and you don't have the room for a stop section there, although I would always encourage you to have it just in case it continues, right? And for the stop section, same rule as when we talked about stop sections before, then it needs to be long enough to actually make the train stop. So what does Märklin say about the length? Well, the transition here. So what is important with the transition section is the transition section must be longer than the slider, also called the pickup shoe underneath the locomotive. So this is exactly as the stop section. It's the pickup shoe that determines when you start braking, because it's when it hits that, it gets power from the braking section, right? So that's another thing. Remember to have your pickup shoe in front or in the back consistently on all trains. I would recommend in front because locomotives have different length, and then it makes more sense that it's in front. So Märklin's recommendation is that the slider or the transition area is at least, or exactly, I'm a little unsure, but 70 to 90 millimeters. You can do that by either having the 24077 track or the 24094, which is either 77 millimeters or 94 millimeters. Then you have the braking section. So what Märklin recommends is a minimum of 30 centimeters. So right in the manual on their website they say at least 40 to 50 centimeters. Well, again, it depends on your trains, how heavy are they, what is the braking delay set for, and so on. So you need to test it and figure it out. The stop section, Märklin recommends a minimum of 30 centimeters. So what you need to think about with respect to the wiring to the braking module. So you saw before that each section basically either has power, no power, or it changes the power from track power to digital power, or it does something mysterious in case of the transition section. So what is important is that the equivalent sections are connected correctly from the brake module. So the brake module basically controls the power within each of them. It does that by controlling the center rail or the B or the red. So that's basically what you need to insulate between each section. So between the transition section and the braking section, you insulate the B or the red or the center rail. Again, between the braking section and the stop section, you do the same. And between the stop section and the following layout and before the transition section, you insulate the B, the center rail, or the red. Then you connect from the brake module into the track, and it basically gives power to the center rail by connecting it to the B or the red. And the symbols you have on the brake module, the S means the transition. Honestly, I don't know where the S comes from. The other symbol that kind of looks like a triangle going down, that's speed decreasing, so that's the brake section or the braking section. And the stop symbol is for the stop section. But it is important to insulate each of these sections. Here we got the little layout I'm gonna set up the braking module on, and I'm gonna set it up such that the braking section is from up here and going down towards here. And remember, it's 3 sections. First, a short section. The short section is basically the transition section over here, and then there's a braking section, which is a longer one, and then finally a stop section. The transition section here is basically 24077. Remember, it just needed to be at least a slider long. The braking section is, I've made it to be 324/188, so normal tracks basically. Remember, this has to be adjusted to how fast your trains brake. And then the stop section is basically only 1 track long. And then we are gonna put the an M83 here to turn on and off the brake module. I'm gonna add that and give that power up before the stop section, or before the transition section, so before where the braking module is. And then I have the braking module here. I'm gonna basically power that after the track here, on the track, connected to the track. Remember that now I'm stealing the power from the track. You might as well have done it from another power source. The important part is that it's your digital power that you power them with. It could be from a power bus, it could be directly from the track, or however else you get the power there. In this case, I'm just gonna connect the brake module here till after where the braking sections are, or after the stop section, and I'm connecting the M83 before the transition section. And that goes well here, because remember, I got an oval, so and as you might be able to see, I got the track power connected to the track over here, so it will come through here. If you don't have an oval, or if you have something else, do consider to connect a bypass wire, a red bypass wire from this side to this side, because remember, what we're going to do is we're going to insulate these 3 sections, and what we're going to insulate is the digital power, i.e. the red track. Now, before getting started, what I find easiest is actually to turn the track around so it's easier to work with. So I'm gonna disconnect 1 track here after, and I'm gonna disconnect 1 track before, and I'm just gonna turn it around like this, because then it's a lot easier to work with. Now let's start with connecting the M83 and looking at the transition section. Let's start by insulating the transition section. So here we got the curved track before. I want to insert my braking module. Then I got the transition section, and then I got the braking section here afterwards. So I need to insulate this. So let's start by disassembling. So here we got the transition section, and remember, this can be a short one. So we need to insulate this one. How do we do this? Let me just zoom in a little. So here you can see we got a rail, and you got a connector right below the rail, and then you got a connector that is a little more towards the center, so not under the rail. Now we want to insulate the red here, because we want to insulate the power. And the way we do that is we take our insulators here, and you can see there's a small hole in this insulator here, and you basically just put it on the one that's not underneath the track but towards the center. You do it by wriggling it a little, and then you can see, and you have to be careful not being too violent, as you saw I was there. It has to stick out perfectly vertical. Here I'm gonna take the track after, and you can see I can push these together, and if they can easily push together, then it's placed correctly. However, this was the track for the stop section, so here's the track for the braking section afterwards. We have the same 2, so we need to insulate on that as well. So I'm just going to turn the track around, because it's easier for me to put it on. I have here an insulator. Again, there's one underneath the track. There's a connection towards the center, and I basically put it here towards the center. I wriggle it on. Okay, we got it there. Excellent. Now I can put them together, and you can see here, oh, this one looks a little bent. I basically just align them and align everything, and then push it together. It shouldn't give you much resistance, more than when you normally connect track. you can turn it around and you can see it's actually insulated here towards the center. Now, that was the piece here towards the braking section. I need to do exactly the same thing on the other side. So we find another set of insulators here. Okay. And notice I turned everything around. We have to put it on here again. Oh, give me a second. It's hard to see through the camera. Okay. Here it is. Yes. And then we need the section before. Okay. So we have that here. We insulate. And we put that in again towards the center, not underneath the rail. Make sure it's not bent. Okay. And then we can push things together, so we align them nicely and put them together. And now you can turn it around, and now you can see I've insulated the next section here as well. All right, and I continue doing that all the way down. So here, this section here is the transition section. So the braking section started here, so we insulated that in that end. I'm just gonna turn it around. I actually zoom out a little, so turn it around. I'll connect it to the rest of the track here, and you can see here we got before, we got the transition section, insulated. We got the braking section here, and that's 1, 2, 3 tracks long, and then we got insulation. And if you look at it exactly the same way as before, we insulate the B, the red, or the track power or the digital power in the track. There's one track here, that's the stop section, and it's insulated in both ends, and then we got the track afterwards. So now I got all the track here. Okay, now we need to start assembling each item. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my M83. So I got my M83. I got 2 wires connected over here to red and brown. I have, by the way, this is the standard M83 as it is when it's taken out of the box and ready to use with turnouts. So in case you have been programming it, you need to reset it to get it into the standard mode. In this example here, remember you can set the address here, or you can do MFX or whatever you like. I've set this one here for address 5 for port 1, which you can see is the 2 that is on, and you can see number 10 is down, so it's doing Märklin Motorola. Okay, I have my track here. I'm just gonna make the track a little shorter so it's easier here in order to do the track power. So let me just zoom out. I'm connecting the track power to the curve before the transition section here, and if we zoom in, what I'm going to do is I have a red and a brown, and do remember the red is the B and it's the tab closest to the edge, so I got my red here. Okay, so I take that one and I just notice again here there's a flat side and there's kind of some things sticking up on the other side. The flat side goes down. You connect it here to the track where the B is, the red, the closest to the edge, and then we need the brown. That's basically the other one here. Okay, so we connect that to, can you see it here? It says 0 there. It might be hard to see, but it's the one furthest from the edge. Okay. Excellent. We connect to that one as well. Okay, and you put it on, and again the flat side down. Okay, so what do we have now? I got the first one here. I have powered my M83. Most excellent. So it has power now, or it can be connected to power, and then I need to make sure that we connect everything else up. So what I want to do now is I want to go all the way to the other end, and here in the other end we have here we got the stop section and the curved track, and now I want to connect my signal module or my brake module, and I need to power that here. Okay, I find a couple of wires. We have here a couple of wires. So I got a red wire and a brown wire. And if we look at how these are made, you see these are basically the connectors. I have unscrewed this and I have basically just put it inside this connector here. Let me just zoom in a little so you can see zoomed it in. So this is the connector. I've added a red wire to that. I have screwed it on. When you screw this on, you be very careful, because this small screw here is, you can't unscrew it as much as you think. If you're looking in here, it looks like you can unscrew it a lot more. It's only a few turns, then you can put in a wire and then you can tighten it again, and then afterwards make sure to pull it to make sure it's good. The other end of the wire, I have attached the spade connector here, and as you can see, I have just squeezed it together around the wire. So you see there's one piece of metal here that holds the insulation, and there's another piece here that basically connects to the wire, so make sure to insulate up to here so that can go around. And I would advise you to solder it together as well. Okay, and all other wires I'm gonna show has exactly the same configuration. So the red here, we connect that to the red on the signal module, and here you need to make sure you see the red is this one here, brown is there, and then come some other ones. So the red is basically here, so I need to connect it in here. Okay, so now it's in there. I take the brown, okay, I also need to connect that one. And here you got to be careful, it can be hard to get all your fingers in. And now we have a red and a brown wire, and I need to connect this to the track. Now in order to make sure that everything is powered correctly, especially if you made contact track out of these, I always power to the same side of the track. So I don't know if you noticed before, I connected to the left hand side of the track, right? So remember, here I just have the stop section. It's insulated here, but I can connect in that end of the track. It's insulated here towards after the stop section, and it's there's also connectors here, so you can connect in both ends of the track. I always connect to the same side as I did with the original power source. So the M83 is connected to this one. I'm gonna connect the power to the same side, and I'm also gonna do the same thing here for after, where I want to connect my braking module. I'm basically going to connect it to the same side over here, so to the left. And again, it may be hard for me this time to lift the track, but the trick is the same. You take the red wire here, it goes on the B, it goes on the tab that's closest to the edge, okay, and you basically push that one on, okay. We got it here, and you do the same thing with the brown wire, and basically just connects it over here as well. And I just noticed one thing here. See, I use this wire so much that it's actually breaking off, so I need to fix that. Now I have a new wire here. I actually discovered that the wire I had was a very thin and weird wire. I don't know. So that was not the original Märklin wire I had with the other one. So you see here I made a new one here where I have attached this one here. By the way, original Märklin wire is not necessarily better. I think it was some old wire I had laying around that wasn't the best. The good thing about the Märklin wire is that it has a decent thickness and there's multi-strands inside. However, you can get that anywhere else than Märklin. Doesn't have to be Märklin wire. So we have the brown here. I need to attach that to the track. I put that into the 0 here, and oh, can I get it in? Oh, it is. So yep, I got it in. And then the other end here I need to put into the signal or the brake module as the power. So now I got these two attached. Now we got a lot of other wires we need to attach. Let's start by these ones here, right? So you have seen the track. I have already, let me zoom out a little. I've already put in all the insulators, right? So I got up here the transition, and I got the insulators, I got the braking, and then I got the stop track down here. So let's put in all of these ones. So I got 3 wires here, and they have spade connectors, all of them in the other end. And basically just what I need to do is I need to connect them to, we're gonna move it a little back and forth, to these 3 here. So the first one here, the S, is the transition area. We connect a wire there. There is a braking area. I connect a wire there. And then there is the stop area, and I connect this wire here. And maybe it would have been smarter to just connect one wire at the time so I don't goof them up. So now it's important to make sure that the wire here that's from the transition area, well, we actually connect that to the transition section here. So the transition section we got up here. I'll disconnect the track here so I can move it closer. So we got it here, and again this is a red wire that comes from over there, and we need to connect it to the B so I can power the transition area as well. Oh, and see here I already made a mistake. That's actually not the transition area. The transition area is over here. So make sure you connect it correctly. We have a red one that comes from the signal module. Let me just zoom in. Okay, I got a red one from the signal module. It needs to go to the B, or the one closest to the edge here on the transition area. Here we have the transition area, and we got that one in there. All right. So, and we double check here. We got transition area. It goes in here, and it goes into the S on here. Now we got the braking area. That's the next one here. Let's trace this wire. It's here, and I want that. So that's the braking area, the first track. Here's the second track, and so on. I'm gonna just connect that here, and remember I'm still always doing it to the left. I connect it to a B, the one closest to the edge. Okay, so we got that there, and then we have the last wire here. This is the one, let me just see if I can move all of this. That's this one here. That's the stop area, okay, or the stop section. We go to the other end. We go find the stop section. The stop section is this one here, and I'm gonna connect that one to the right as well. So, or left, sorry. And on the B, and on the closest to the edge, let me do it like this, then it might be easier to see. And we have that here, okay. And now we got that connected. I have all my track here. Okay. Okay, let's review what we've done. I zoomed out a little, so hopefully we can get a better overview of what it is. If you notice over here, that's the part of the oval from before we started putting in all the wires. There is actually a red wire over there, that's track power. Then I put in here on the last curved track here, so the last track before I insert the brake module, I put the power here for the M83. It doesn't need to be added to the track. You could do it to a power bus instead. Then we have the brake module here. It is powered here over behind where we install the brake module, so in the first track behind. Again, it doesn't need to be powered from the track. It could be powered from a power bus instead. And in this case here, I got an oval around. So if I have power over here, I also got in the other end. If I didn't, then I should consider to make a bypass from this side all the way past all the where I have installed the braking module to the other side. And what is it I need to bypass? It's the red, because it's the red I'm insulating in each section. Then we got here the brake module. So this side here has the power. On the other side we got the 3 ones that goes to each section. The first one, S, is the transition section. It goes up there. That's the small one up here, the 24077. I put it on the B, or on the one closest to the end of the track. Then I got the next one here. That's where the symbol kind of looks like a volume or braking or decreasing speed. And that one goes to the braking section, which is this entire piece here. And then the last wire here that has a stop sign on it goes to the stop section, which is there. So now I have basically connected the braking module to power and to all the sections we have there. Now I want to turn it around. Okay, so we turn this around. We make sure all the wire, none of the wires bend and so on. Okay, so we got that here. Excellent. And then I can connect the track. So we connect that here and here. And now we can look at how we activate the brake module with the M83. So now we need to connect the M83 to the braking module. We got the braking module here. I'll just zoom in. And you can see here where the braking module is, it says Decoder. We got 3 colors here, so we need to connect that. I'm following the Märklin color scheme, so I got one of each of the colors here. However, the red and the green, when they come out, I use the blue wire, and the yellow, I do have a yellow wire. So I'm basically just using the Märklin color scheme here. Okay, so let's connect it up. I got a yellow plug. So let me just zoom in again. I got a yellow plug here. I connect that there. It needs to go into that hole there. Okay, excellent. Then I got a red plug. It needs to go into the left of the yellow. So I connect that here. All right. Okay, so I got those 2 for the decoder, and then I got the green one here. All right, and by the way, these colors might look like what you'll recognize from turnouts. And the frustrating thing here is that they turn into 2 blue wires and 1 yellow wire as well here. Okay, now we need to connect it to the M83. So I'm connecting it to port 1 here. Okay, let me just zoom in. I'm connecting it to port 1, and the yellow wire basically goes into the center. I'm just going to put down the blue wires. Make sure this one is sufficiently twisted. I can plug it in here in the center of port 1. Okay, that's there. Let me see if I can hold it. All right, I got it here. And then we tighten this one. Okay, we give it a little tug to make sure it's there. Now I take, you see here's the red, I take the blue here, the blue wire, find the other end of the red, so we got the other end here, twist it a little. I put that basically in where it's red on port 1, so yellow goes in the center and red goes to red. Although I'm using a blue wire. Okay. And that's basically looking like when we do the turnouts. Again, the other one here, and we could trace it over from the green here. It goes here. All right, we go find the other end, and it's here. All right, cool. And we put that in where we got the green. So I got the green here on port 1. So everything is connected to port 1. All right. Cool. So now I got the 3 ones here from port 1 on the M83. The yellow goes to the yellow, and then we got the red and the green. They each go to the red and the green over here on my braking module. And now we are essentially done, and we can start testing it. Let's look at how we change the brake module between red and green when we're using the Mobile Station 2. So I have the Mobile Station 2 here. Let me just zoom in. So I have the Mobile Station 2 here. Do remember that the M83 is set for address 5, and the first port on there is what I've connected to the braking module. So how do I do that? Well, accessories, I go up here underneath the turnout. So right here, I click this one here, and then you can see in the keyboard various addresses are shown. You can use the buttons up here to walk up and down in addresses. You can also use the shift and then the knob and then turn it, and then we'll go a lot faster. So now you see it's address 12. I'm gonna press this one here till it go down. When it says 5, 6 like this, it means 5 is to this side and 6 is to this side. So if I want to set it for red, I use the buttons over here, and the same thing for green. So by the way, the first time you connect it, what it says here on the Mobile Station 2 might not be how the M83 perceives the world, because they have never talked together. So you need to make sure to press on here at least once, and now you see now it's red, and now I can press green here. And if you listen, you might be able to hear it says click. And that's actually the way you can see it. Do remember that on the M83, you can also see the light blinking. Let's do a short recap of how you get the M83 to work. So remember, I had it on address 5. I can go out of stop mode. This is the black M83, so I can basically just say discover. This time I'm going to keep its address because I already set the address. I hit OK, and then you basically just wait for it to be registered. When it's done, we can basically go ahead and find it. So we go under edit article list, and you can see here is my M83 that it automatically read in. If you look down here, the address is red. That's because there's always something in the Central Station 3 when it's been reset. So we can go ahead and delete the other one. So this signal here, the other signal, and these ones here as well. All right. And then we actually have it here. And don't forget, I can go in here and change the icon if I want. So A1 here is the first port. Now, what if I didn't have the black one, but the white one, where I have to add it by itself? So remember, when you delete an MFX device, you delete the decoder. So I delete that. Now, if I just had something, or I had the white one, then you can just go ahead and add it. You can see now it's called S1. It's called S1 down here. And then I just need to remember to set the address to, oops, not 15, but 5. And then I actually have the port here. And that's the first port, because remember I set it to address 5. Again, I can also change the icon here if I like to something else. But I like this one. I go out of my article list, and then I can pull down up here. And here I can find it. And this one I can use to change the brake module between red and green. All right, here we have the entire setup. I put down some track next to the oval here again to illustrate where the different sections are. So first we have the transition section, then we got the braking section, and then we got the stop section. We got the braking module down here that you can see is connected to each of the sections, so it can control the power in each of the sections. And I have the M83 connected to the braking module as well. So the first thing I will do is I will set the M83 to red, so the port 1 to red, because that's where I connected it, so it's now red. Let's turn on the sound for the locomotive, because this is the benefit of the braking module compared to the stop section. When I've illustrated signals for stop section before, it basically just powers off, which means the sound will disappear. I hope you can hear the sound here, but there basically is sound on. So now let's, it's set to red now, the braking module. So now let's just go ahead and give it a decent speed, and let's see what happens, because now it should actually brake. And you saw it braked. You even had a nice brake sound, and remember what I discussed before. The brake sound often depends on the speed the locomotive has. So if it coming at a slow speed into the braking section and braking, you probably will not hear it. When it comes with a higher, you will hear it. Okay, now I'm gonna change the port 1 or the address 5 on the M83 to green, and let's see what happens. So remember, when it's in the braking section and it's red, it gets DC. The decoder reacts to that and it brakes. Now what we would expect is when we turn it green, that the braking module will give normal digital power or normal track power inside the braking section, and then it would start up again. So that was green now. And that was really nice, because now it continues, and I'm gonna keep it on green just to see what happens. And the locomotive drives right through exactly as we would expect. Now there's a couple of things here that's a little interesting. I'm setting it to red again, so now it's braking. Yep, it's braking. So what you have to remember now is this is not digital power to the locomotive. So you cannot, even though it's MFX and you can do program on track, you cannot do that now. I cannot turn off the sound either or anything, because the digital signal is basically not going through. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the sound. Okay, I did that just right now, and you notice nothing happens. The interesting part is that at least for MFX, it will then just delay and send the signal later when there is contact to the train again. This is nothing to do with the braking module. This is just how MFX talks together with the locomotive decoder. So basically when it's available again and gets a digital signal, it will actually get the sound off. So now I'm gonna turn it green. And you notice now the power or the sound actually turns off, even though I turned it off before. Interestingly enough, the decoder here reacts with when you turn the power off. Actually you see it first turned the sound off and then it started off. This is actually decoder dependent and can depend on many things, and the different types of decoders even within Märklin might actually react differently, and even depending on how you have set up your decoder, and decoders from other brands will also behave differently. Let me though try one more thing here. So I'm turning on power, and if you notice now I'm just right in front of the transition section. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna turn the braking module to red, or I'm gonna set port 1 on the M83 or address 5 to red. So I do that now. So now we would expect it to brake, and now I'm just gonna go very, very slow into the section here. And what you will notice here is, see, it passes the transition section, and as soon as it hits the braking section, it brakes. And you heard there was no squealing sound because it was actually going a much slower. This is also the reason we need the transition section here, because now you see the locomotive is actually parked across the two sections. It might be a little difficult to see, but the slider's on the front bogie and the bogie is actually on both places here. So this is the case where now it has short-circuited between the braking section and the transition section, and that's why the transition section is there, to prevent a short circuit to the rest of the layout. And then we have the braking module down here that's being so smart to make sure there is no short circuit. So we turn it to green again, and let's see if it starts up. And it does. Really nice. And that's how the braking module works. How do I change the braking delay on the Mobile Station 2? Well, I got my Mobile Station 2 here, and as you can see here, I got my locomotive, and it's my class 232 or my Ludmilla. Remember, you can hit shift here, and then you can turn the knob, and then you will actually, when you turn the knob, go to another locomotive, and you can go both ways. Okay, so now I'm here on my Ludmilla. Then I hit shift and then the locomotive down here. All right. When I have the locomotive, you can see there's a change locomotive here in the configure locomotive menu. I click on the button next to change loco. Okay, I click out here, and now there's a scroll bar over here. I can use these buttons over here. I go down, and actually the braking delay here on the Mobile Station 2 is called deceleration. So you can see that's actually here. DEC, I press on the button next to it, and here you can see that the deceleration here is 16. If it's the first time you have loaded it, then it's probably correct. If you have removed it, changed the settings on another layout and come back, it may or may not be correct here. Then you have to delete the locomotive and rediscover it using MFS. In this case, it's actually correct. So I can actually change the value. I can use plus or minus. You can see plus and minus here. I use the buttons next to it, so I can press here or over here, and then I can change it. I can also use the knob and change it. So let me just change it to a deceleration or braking delay of twice the value, which is 32. Down here is a check mark. I hit the button here with a check mark, and now the locomotive is actually programmed. I can hit the revert here, and I can go out, and now I can test it out. So how do I change the braking delay on the Central Station 3? Well, this is a MFX enabled locomotive, so it's actually pretty easy. So I have my locomotive down here. I can go into edit locomotives, and you see the icon changes. That's basically a little X up here, so I could delete it, but I want to edit it, so I click on it. Then we got the locomotive settings here. I go into setup. You can see the braking delay here is 16. What I can do is I can change it. So I'm going to double it to 32. And I basically just hit OK. And now the new value is actually already given to the locomotive. Now let's experiment with the distance for the braking. So I'm just going to give it a certain speed and then see how far it gets before it stops. So here it comes. All right, so it stopped here. That's basically here with my screwdriver. So now we try again, and this time I have actually doubled the braking delay, so I would expect it to actually have a longer braking distance and get further into the braking section before it stops. So let's try that. Let's see if I can hit about the same speed again. That's about the same speed. And we see it braking, and you see it brakes a lot later. You see it actually got an entire train length further. And actually what you notice now, it almost hit the stop section. So this is where the stop section is beneficial, because if it didn't brake, at least the stop section will catch it, so it won't run into another train. Because if there was no stop section, right, then the first track afterwards would basically have digital power. And what is it the decoder does every time it means digital power? Well, then it goes back to normal speed, which would be the same as if we took the braking module green. So I do that now, and then it will basically go back to normal speed. So in that case, if you're not careful, it could actually go all the way across the braking section. So this is why it's important to make sure the braking section is long enough. It's important to have the stop section as well, because that can be used as the emergency stop. However, you could also consider not having a stop section, but then you need to be absolutely sure you tested all your trains. There's no trains that would accidentally brake too late, and so on. So that's things you need to think about. All right, that was the braking module, the principle behind it, and how you wire it in a simple way, that is using the M83. Later on, we also need to look at how to wire it for signals and so on, but that will be in later videos. So what did we actually do? Well, we have the braking module. The braking module actually works by having 3 sections. There's a short section over here. In this case, I had a length of 2477, but it needs to be 7 to 8 centimeters long, basically the length of a pickup shoe. This is a transition section. After that, I had a longer section of 3 tracks, and that is my braking section. So the braking section is the section where what the signal module or brake module tells the locomotive is, here you need to brake. How does it do that? It does that by sending out a DC power to the track. The benefit of the DC power is that the decoder can still use the DC power, but it knows there's something up and there's something different. So now what it does is it breaks down nicely. It uses the braking configuration that's normally built into the locomotive. So basically the braking delay and whatever else there is. So in Märklin decoders, there's a braking delay. In some other decoders, there are other stuff. I've even seen somebody program decoders such that they first glide a little and then brake. In addition to that, the braking sound will come on as well if it has a sufficient speed. The benefit with the braking section compared to stop section, which we've seen in previous videos, is that it's still powered. However, it's not the digital power, it's another power. So that's why the transition section here is very, very important. Because out here we got normal power, and in the braking section there's DC power. And when it transits into this or drives into the braking section, the slider may actually be across 2 tracks, or it will be at some point in time, and even the wheels will be across 2 tracks as well. So what we need to make sure is that it doesn't short circuit between the braking section and the outside of the layout. That's the smartness built into the braking module. In addition to that, the braking module has also a stop section. This is a stop section in the traditional way, such that if there is no, or if the signal is red, or if the brake module is set to red, I should say, then it will actually have no power in this section. The idea with the stop section is that it kind of works as an emergency, such that if the train didn't manage to brake, at least it will brake when it gets to here. It also managed to work as an emergency for locomotives that don't support it. So remember, the decoder has to support the Märklin brake module. The good thing is most modern decoders actually do this. The stop section, I only had the length of 1 track here. You may want it longer depending on how sure you are of the train actually stopping. All in all, what I would do if I was you using the braking section or braking module is test every single train, test every single locomotive, make sure that it brakes within the braking section. Then you could actually even consider, maybe I don't need the stop section here, but you have to make sure that everything else works absolutely reliable. There's one pitfall, or a couple of pitfalls. So yes, the decoder needs to support the braking module and detect the DC power. Some decoders you need to enable that it detects this. Some decoders, or most decoders, even the Märklin ones, are actually multi-protocol, and they will work both with digital track power, but they will also work with AC and DC. So you can have a locomotive decoder that comes in. So the locomotive comes in when it hits the DC section, which is a braking section. It could be smart and say, oh, now it's DC, so I'll just switch to DC power and continue on. So that's why in most decoders you need to make sure that the DC is turned on by default. If you buy a Märklin locomotive, then it will already have been set for, or with the modern locomotives I should say, it will already have been set for using the braking module and not using DC power. So the other thing you need to think about is, if you have a signal, where would you place it? How long is your braking section? So I used in this video M83 because that's actually the simplest setup. You saw with the M83, the only thing I needed to do was 3 wires into where the decoder is. If you want to have a signal control the braking module, it actually requires an additional power supply and more advanced wiring. However, if you don't want to do that, you could even consider having a separate signal and the M83 on there as well. And then they could either have the same address, so they change at the same time, or you could have, in case you have a central station 3, you could have that one control it as well. So I really hope you liked this video. Please do give it a thumbs up. Please remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see some of the upcoming videos. Don't forget to hit the little notification bell as well, because then you will actually be notified when there is an upcoming video. And don't forget that subscribing is free. Enjoy!